When you start a restaurant or a retail shop, there's a retail for dummies. I mean, there's books out there, there's roadmaps. I really looked at it as, this is just like anything else. I've got to figure this out, and I loved that.
Hey, it's Nate DiSarro, and welcome to Titans of Industry, the podcast where I talk to industry leaders and innovators who are at the top of their game and leading the pack in their fields, uncovering some of the best stories in today's business landscape. In today's episode, I sit down with Heather Nelson, co-founder and president of Seal Solar. Heather tells us why the future of solar energy is a bipartisan issue, what she means when she says the same skill that will build a company will kill it, and how letting go of control can be the best step in leading a company. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm pretty sure it was Heather's first time out of the house since quarantine began. And now let's get to the episode. But before we do, it's important to know that whether you're a small business owner or the face of a multi-billion-dollar industry, your organization has a great story to tell, and Content Titan wants to help you tell it. We are a digital content creation powerhouse built for the 21st century, providing all-in creative, strategic, production, post-production, and distribution services for a 360-degree, 24/7 world. In our world, Titans are passionate, creative doers. They have the experience to take your project from start to finish, minimizing your involvement so you can focus on what matters most, running your business. So if you're ready to take your content strategy and production to the next level, our Titans are ready to help. Now here's my conversation with Heather Nelson. All right, well, Heather, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And I would love to just jump straight into how you got started in solar energy, because I know you have a banking background, right?
I do. It's a long story. When we started Seal back in 2012, we actually started as a QC firm for energy efficiency work across Arkansas, and I can go into a little bit of that story. It is kind of long, but my business partner, Josh Davenport, actually he was working for his father, who's a commercial contractor, and he was at a charity event one night and bumped into an employee of the Clinton Foundation. And back in 2011, they were the Clinton Foundation had multiple divisions. I'm not sure what the setup is there now, but they had a group called the Clinton Climate Initiative. And inside that group, they were incubating some nonprofits. And one of the nonprofits they were incubating at the time was, the acronym was HEAL. Please don't ask me to remember what that stood for, but it was a nonprofit started in the middle of Hurricane Katrina down in New Orleans, and about rebuilding that community, but doing it with higher energy efficiency standards. And President Clinton had learned about it, loved it, and knew some of the members of that nonprofit, and so brought it in under the CCI group and said, let's try to make something of it. Well, they were finding some success, and President Clinton said, actually, I guess the story goes that he was in Little Rock and he was in meetings there at the Clinton Foundation and said, you guys are going to have to find a for-profit partner outside of this because we cannot kind of handle funds the way that we're doing as this thing grows. And so they started looking for a general contractor in Arkansas who was interested and focused on energy efficiency work. They went through a bunch of interviews with contractors, and they were unsuccessful. And so it was serendipitous that night that one of the key people on that team bumped into this young whippersnapper, as I like to jokingly tell the story. He's 20, I think he was 25 or 26 at the time when they met, and here he is. He's in construction. He's environmentally minded. They just connected. They had one of those connections. Was having lunch with his dad in late summer of 2012, and he is going on and on and on about his son Josh and this business idea. And when you're in corporate lending for almost 2 decades, you give a lot of free advice. Corporate lenders are notorious for not being able to get paid for their brains. We just give advice because that's our nature and the nature of the business. And so he was peppering me with questions, and I was just answering them in between bites of salmon. And all of a sudden, I guess something hit me, and I looked up and I said, "Doesn't Josh work for you? I mean, who's going to run this thing?" And he said, "You are." And I said, "The hell I am." Long story short, by the time I got out of the restaurant, he had Josh on the phone, and Josh handed the phones to me, and Josh said, "Meet me at Dad's office. I'll be there in 5 minutes. You've got to do this with me." So we started it actually with the mindset of doing QC behind this nonprofit. But what happened is that it didn't take us long to realize that a nonprofit is not a for-profit. And so the mindset of a nonprofit is not, they're not worried about cash flow. Their mindsets and the metrics that they're measured by are different. And so it didn't take us long to realize that their metrics and what was important to them was not jiving with us. We had no income, and we're trying to figure out how to put a business model together and saying this isn't going to work. And so very quickly we ended up kind of pivoting a little bit and changed our business model, started doing the work ourselves, and then started branching out to do work outside of that contract with them. Within 6 months, our business plan's out the window. Our business model's completely different. We have no income, and the partner that really had juiced us up and got us excited about doing this is, floundering a little bit as far as not being able to produce to flow through to us what they thought. And so we're kind of looking at each other going, we are nuts. What has just happened? That first year we were just in the weeds trying to make a living, trying to generate cash flow, and trying to figure out how we fit into the industry. Because what had happened in that first 6 months is we kind of fallen in love with it. So here, you got a corporate lender and a contractor. What do we know about, energy efficiency? But we really fell in love with the story. We fell in love with the industry. And so then it was kind of the race was on to figure out how can we carve our own path inside of this industry that we've fallen in love with, and figure out if there's a business here or not. And we really just focused on taking care of the customer, whatever it was, and customer service, and really just hoped the rest would come. And what happened was we ended up getting, utilities would call us and say, "We'd really like you to do our energy efficiency programs," and word of mouth, and friends and family said, "Come to our houses," and then utility and third-party implementers heard about us, and they said, "Well, will you do commercial? Will you do this?" And so, the next thing we know, we're just piloting all these different types of projects. So, within a year, we made a profit our first year, which is unheard of. And, I think we did $1.4 million our first year. And I don't remember I'm sure that our net income was not much to write home about, but I remember being really proud because it was positive. And so we just started growing because of kind of taking on and testing work, and we really loved the work.
I love that. It's an amazing story of entering an industry without a whole lot of knowledge. So talk to me about the learning curve, because obviously anytime any entrepreneur hops into a new venture, there's a learning curve. But for you, it's a transition outside of the industry that you knew into something that obviously nobody was really doing. So it wasn't something you could just watch how somebody else is doing it in the market and sort of, I guess, figure it out from them. You had to kind of pioneer the way.
Yeah, and that's really kind. But it was tough. And I think ironically, what served at least me well, I know this is an interview with me and not Josh, but I'll speak for him for a second. I think what served him well was that he was young and curious, and smart. And if you throw a topic at him, he's going to deep dive into it. I think what served me well was that I didn't look at this any differently than what I've been doing the last couple of decades, because when you're in corporate lending, you have to know a lot about a lot of different industries and a lot of different companies. When you go before a committee to ask for, $50, $75 million or $5 million, the credit guys want to know that what that company's about and what it's going to do, and you understand the history of it, and you understand what it's going to do in the future. And it was difficult because there was no roadmap. You know, when you start a restaurant or even an HVAC company or an engineering firm or a retail shop, there's a retail for dummies. I mean, there's books out there. There's roadmaps. When we started this, I couldn't even figure out how to do the GL coding for this thing. And when I talked to accounting friends and bookkeeper friends, they were like,
You're on your own.
What's the cash flow cycle of this? I really looked at it as, you know, this is just like anything else. I've got to figure this out. And I loved that. I really like puzzles, and I looked at it as just one giant puzzle. I really fell in love with really the guts of what we do when we kind of went into solar, because I was watching what had happened with solar and how it was transforming Haiti, which is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. I don't know. I just kind of fell in love, I guess.
I think it's really interesting to me that you go from corporate lending to energy efficiency and then determine you want to invest money into solar where, there's no roadmap, this is going to be a great move. Whereas in corporate lending, it kind of, your mindset has to be, this needs to be a good use of funds.
Right.
So talk me through that process of pivoting your business model, moving into an industry that, you know, there's just not a great roadmap for, but obviously it's working and you have a passion for it. Business partner is incredibly curious, and we talked a little bit previously about sort of the way his mind works and putting all that into good use. So there's calculated risk that goes into that, right?
Yeah. I'll be honest, you can't do it without entrepreneurs. But it's the team that's going to get you there. It's the team that's going to go, okay, as those dreams start manifesting and growing, the team gave Josh and I the confidence together, not this is what Heather wants to do or this is what Josh wants to do, but together we were able to go, both of us are in agreement, it feels right. It feels right to pivot and put all of our chips on the table with solar. The puzzle had to completely fit together. And if we had not had a team that could execute that, we couldn't have gotten there mentally that now's the time to do it. But we felt like we had the team and we had the building blocks to put the rest of the parts of the team that we didn't have together.
And I think, to interject, that
Yeah.
no entrepreneur business book out there will tell you that you can do it alone, that you can do it with your own abilities and passion. It's all about developing the right team, putting them in place, and then essentially creating the system to allow them to take the company where you want it to go.
Right, because I mean, at some point, if you're going to continue to scale and grow, you've got to get out of the weeds, and you've got to start spending more and more time thinking of what does 6 months from now look like, what is 1 year, what is 3 years, you know, and you just think about the last 9 weeks. Josh and I said this on a panel recently for Dr. Carol Reeves' class and Amy Farmer's class. If this situation, this last season we've been in, the last 9 weeks, if this had happened a year and a half ago, our firm would not have weathered it in the same way. And that's because of team and some key components that we put together last year. Number one, it was the decision to divest of the other lines of business and be solely focused on solar. But it was also because we had put a leadership team in place, and there was a lot of discussion, let's put it that way, about what that framework should look like and roles and responsibilities. Because that's really the hard part with entrepreneurs is we're control freaks. I mean, show me a successful entrepreneur that's not a control freak. I mean, just show me one. I'm not gonna finish that sentence. I'm just say, show me one.
Yeah.
I've never known a successful entrepreneur that wasn't a control freak.
Sure.
But at some point, that control freak has to let go, and that's the really hard part. At some point, they have to trust, and they have to let go, or they're gonna the same skill that will build a company will kill it.
Absolutely.
And so, I think that's where, We've been really transparent the last year and a half that Josh and I have really struggled with control and letting go.
So I'd love to dive into that just a little bit, because you're spot on, and everybody I talk
my
to,
counselor.
but everybody I've talked to that's an entrepreneur and a successful one at that, absolutely, that's the case. Control is everything, and that's what gets you to a certain point, but you can't sustain that forever.
Can't sustain it.
So what did that look like? How did you figure out now's the time to relinquish control? Now's the time to let go of certain things but not others? I mean, is there a point in time that you could identify that that's what you had to do? And
I think there's a really politically correct, nice, warm, fuzzy answer that anybody who's listening to this or looking to this for any kind of value of how I should do it, and I'm not going to give that answer, because the truth of the matter is it was gnarly, and I openly wrote a piece on LinkedIn a few years ago. It took me a year. I think I wrote it a year after I started it, but I hired a counselor. I started counseling in March of 2016. And I think I wrote about it the first time I did that LinkedIn post, and kind of like a confessional. Like, the worst kept secret, in our company is that one of the founders and leaders is in counseling. I wrote that piece because what I found out over my first year of counseling was that a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of executives go to counseling. And that's kind of the dirty secret nobody talks about. And what I love is that people are starting to talk about it more, because the truth of the matter is entrepreneurship will show you skills that you had no idea you had, but it will show you the depths of your weaknesses in a way that will take your breath. The things that you have hold up in dark places of your soul, it takes them out and it blows them up, and you have an unbelievable audience, depending on if you have just an internal audience inside your company or an external, depending on how public your company is. But what I found is things that had happened to me since I was young that had made me uber successful also were killing me. And just trying to figure out that red string and how it all connected, and kind of putting all that together. I mean, it was just this tremendously long journey. And the best thing expensive, time consuming, uncomfortable, but it was critical. And so that was happening. And Josh sometimes says I got some free counseling because, Heather's bringing. But one of the books that got recommended to me during that period was Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. And I love it when I'm on panels and people say, what is the best business book you recommend? And I go, Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. And I remember the first time I ever said that in the room, and people flooded up to me afterwards crying and saying, oh my gosh, I need that book. Because I explained to them, because especially when you have business partners and you're an entrepreneur, all of a sudden, if you had boundaries, they go out the window. And if you have good boundaries, they get tested. And what if one of you has good boundaries but the other doesn't? And so, I really say that Boundaries is a great book for partners to read and entrepreneurs to read, because you have to figure out how to separate your work from your life. Otherwise, you're not going to have a life.
Which for entrepreneurs is almost an oxymoron. You can't, right? I mean, it's not something you do. That's almost why you become an entrepreneur, is because you're so passionate about something, you dive into it, and you're exactly right. There is no boundary. So that's really fascinating. We can skip over that question at the end about favorite book. I think we identified that one. But well, thanks for the vulnerability and talking through that, because I think you're right. A lot of people are now starting to kind of have that conversation, and it's becoming more and more apparent. And to address, you mentioned the season we're in. We're recording this episode in May of 2020, obviously coming out of the shutdown, the pandemic. And so I think it's only going to become a more relevant topic. And I know there's a local mental health company that has just mentioned they're hiring 115 people, Alleviant Health, and they, it's going to become a more substantial part of the conversation, I think, for not just entrepreneurs, but really the workforce in general. And it is hard to talk about, I think. It's something that takes some time and courage to work through. And so thanks for kind of diving into that. I know it's not easy, not fun to bring up or talk about, but it's, I think, allowing other people to know that that's actually okay and it actually is helpful.
Yeah.
So that's great. Talk us through how you decided that was the move you needed to make and put all those eggs in one basket, and really become a focused niche company. Because I think a lot of people want to say, well, I don't want to let go of this child over here, even though it may not be the most successful or profitable or whatever, but you have to make that decision at some point.
Yeah, the worst thing, and what entrepreneurs always say, it's my baby, and that's so true, and we should not say that, but it is true. Companies are our babies, and solar had been, since we started putting R&D into it, it had been year over year, like 3-1. I mean, it was outperforming the other business lines more and more. That's where our focus was going, because there was a lot happening at the Arkansas Public Service Commission, which kind of governs all of this, and a lot happening in the industry, and that's where our hearts were and where more of our mind was going, and our team. I mean, when we sat down with our team, the majority really that's where their hearts were. Josh likes to use the phrases, I want to do the hot, sexy thing, and so, that was hot and sexy. I mean, compared to, air sealing, duct sealing, insulation, LED lighting, so there was, for the majority of our team, there was just no comparison on where their interests lied and what they were interested in and passionate. And so we were keenly aware that if you want to get the best out of people, you want them passionate and driven and excited, and those were all factors that kind of went into it. So the performance of solar, what was really happening in the industry in Arkansas, it felt like the crystal ball was starting to formulate, and so it wasn't just simply what we thought based on historical and reading and learning. It was really, we're seeing the future start to unfold a little bit, and things that we had said were going to happen 2 years prior were starting to happen. So I think that gave Josh and I confidence that, okay, there's a little bit more stability. So kind of all of those factors. So your team's kind of there, the performance is there, the industry's there, and it just felt like if we were going to do it, let's do it. And then there's the whole thing about clarity of focus. I mean, when we at the height, we had 55 employees and 3 different offices and 5 lines of business. We were trying to spin all the plates and be all things to all people, both externally and internally. And the truth is, it was killing us. It was really hard to let go of employees who had been with us so long that kind of went with the lines of business. But once you made the decision and once the switch was flipped, so to speak, it just felt so right.
I remember I did an interview with John Tyson III around the whole idea of what's the best piece of advice you can give regarding business, and obviously a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 company in Tyson Foods that he was the instrumental piece in kind of taking it to where it is now. And he said, well, it's pretty simple, actually. We try a whole lot of things. And when we find one that works, we put everything we have into that. Yep. And when we find one that doesn't work, we cut it off so fast and move on to the next thing. Because if you dwell on something that doesn't work, just thinking maybe it'll eventually work, you're burning time, resources, and energy that you just can't afford to burn, because there is that one thing that you're going to find and it works. And the market's going to tell you if it works.
That's right.
Right? And I think the market always wins. So it seems pretty apparent that not only was your team there, the industry's there, but the market's there.
Yeah, and that's really great wisdom. And I think that's the difference between a generation in a company like that's not a founder. I think that the problem that happens to the founders is they can't let go.
Yeah,
and I think that's
like you said,
beauty.
It shouldn't be your baby, but it is.
Yeah, and so that's really not easy, but that's clarity of focus for that somebody to step in, second, third generation and go, we need to cut faster, we need to grow faster. But we didn't have that in in a child, but we were adding people to our team that were adding that kind of insight. It really added discernment to things that Josh and I were already thinking or had been thinking. But then when you have an outsider go, man, you gotta cut that, or you've got to grow that. It was just it was kind of that confirmation. And
trust. You had to have the trust.
Founders don't want to talk about that but that's a real issue, and you've got to have people that you trust at that table, whether it's an advisory board or an official board of directors or just members of your leadership team that can really say those hard things. I mean, nobody wants to be told you really need to get rid of a couple of business lines. Mm-hmm. No founder wants to hear that.
Sure.
And so that ended up being a really critical component. But it is really important to have a team of advisors that you really trust.
This morning I read an article in the New York Times about, for the first time in history, renewable energy has surpassed coal. I don't know if that's on a national scale or worldwide scale. I would assume national. But either way, partly as a result of, I think, the pandemic situation, but also it's been trending that direction. So from your perspective, talk about the importance of what that means and how we move forward now that, we're kind of over that hump, it sounds like. Who knows if it'll stay there, but we hope it does. Yeah. But obviously you're in solar energy for a reason. Not only the importance and passion that you see in it, but the way that the world needs to go with it. So we're making strides in a direction that I would think you're pretty excited about.
Very excited about. I haven't read that article, but I will be reading it this afternoon since you've mentioned it. That's what the crystal ball says, that's where we're all going. And, you can really get into the politics of, climate change and all that. But I guess it may be because of my background. I tend to be more fiscally conservative too. But since day one, Steel Solar has pushed ROI. And so what I would say is solar makes sense because it has a great ROI. It also has great benefits, when you think about if you care about the environment and all things, carbon footprint and all of that, then there's a great case to be made for solar in those factors. So I like to say it's nonpartisan. I mean, Republicans like it, Democrats like it, and we try to stress that. So there's something for everybody with solar, and I think that's one reason that it's taking off. But the main reason is it's technology. I mean, we always like to do the thing with your cell phone. I mean, I got my first cell phone my first year out of college, so that was maybe the fall of '94. And so we think about, back then, the technology was, a computer, a hard drive was as big as this building that we're sitting in right now. And now you've got that in a phone that you carry in your back pocket. And just, technology just keeps moving. I mean, you can get all caught up in politics and philosophy and everything else, but technology, you're not going to stop that. Technology in so many ways is very comparable to nature. You can't stop nature, you can't stop technology. And so the technology is just continuing to grow. I mean, when we started investing in solar in 2015, I mean, the price of solar's gone down something like 50 to 60% since 2015. So that was 5 years ago. And so the price is going down, which again is the same thing that drove the cell phone. It got smaller and smaller and cheaper and cheaper.
And more powerful, by the way.
And more powerful. And so that's another thing. When we started this, the biggest warranty you saw was 25 years. A year ago, we started seeing 30-year warranties. So we still install, depending on the project, some 25-year warranty project, but a lot of it is 30-year. We just finished the project up for Washington County, and those are all 30-year modules. So, and that's a performance guarantee for 30 years. And so you're seeing that the longer the technology's in the field, so to speak, that those companies are pushing those warranties out further and further. And so the other thing is the politics of coal. The truth is coal got unpopular because it got too expensive, and but it is dirty, and there are a lot of reasons to get away from coal. But right, wrong, or indifferent, we're looking at 40% of our power in Arkansas is coming from coal, and that's going to go away in the next few years. Well, how do we replace that, and what do we replace that with? And I think then you've got to counter that with, when I talk to our peers that are in other states, they're like, what do you mean you have 26 utilities? I mean, some states have, 2 utilities in the entire state. Arkansas has, 17 electric cooperatives, 3 or 4 investor-owned, and then a handful of munis. I mean, we have a lot of different utilities with different rules and regulations that somebody in our industry is having to navigate through, and also, fight those policy battles. And so, this is not an easy state because of all of those many hurdles. But yet, you're watching it the last couple of years, you're seeing all this solar pop up. And so why would somebody with large barriers to entry, large policy question marks, why would entrepreneurs, do businesses? And it's because they see the opportunity. And there's 3 commissioners that govern all this, and all 3 have been now appointed by Republican governor, and that's amazing. When you think of, we've got really great, strong policy, renewable policy in the state of Arkansas currently, though it's all getting pushed around and questioned and fought. But we have really great policy. We have great support from our governor to our legislature to, all these mayors and county judges are choosing for their communities to go solar. There's a lot of forward momentum, but we also have 26 utilities, and one of them is pro-solar. The rest of them are pro-solar for themselves, but don't believe in solar for for residential or commercial or communities. And so there's kind of a battle going, and the revolutionist in me really enjoys that. And part of me, it just gets tired from it. And so I do think that they can put policies in place, and we can keep having to fight these, debates and discussions around value and, is there value to solar on your home that's getting pushed back to the grid at some points, and is there value to your individual utility if you do that? I mean, we can debate all of that, and we can even lose some battles in that front, but that's not going to stop the technology. It's not going to stop it from, to your point, getting more powerful and the cost going down, and people saying, that's what I want. I want some control over my utility cost. We've had a really busy storm season here this spring, right in the middle of the global pandemic, and people are calling us about storage. I mean, if you had told me a year ago that we would be having the battery storage conversations with customers that we're having right now, I would have said, you're crazy, that's too aggressive. Yeah. But what happens is you get a global pandemic, you get the average, a mom and a dad both working from home with 2.2 kids, and now the electricity goes out. And all of a sudden they're going, so tell me about that storage where I can have power no matter what happens outside. So it's just, amazing to kind of watch what's happening nationally and globally. But what's fascinating is Arkansas is right in the thick of it. Mm-hmm. So, what you're seeing, the discussions and the technology that's getting used in California right now, I mean, all these places are ahead of us, but we're right in the thick of those discussions. So Arkansans right now can take advantage of technology in real time at a rate that we've never seen. So that is really, really exciting.
It's fascinating. Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. It's interesting to me that you go from a QC company in 2012 or 13, and now you're talking about the sort of part you play in the political landscape of solar energy. And did you see that coming? Did you see yourself becoming this instrumental in sort of political conversations and all the things that come along with just wanting to make people's homes more efficient?
No, and I think I really have always enjoyed kind of spinning the plates behind somebody. I mean, when we would start, I would tell Josh, you dream it and I'll build it. So you'll be the dreamer, I'll be the dream engineer. I don't know if that's still on our website, but for years that was on our website. And what's happened, ironically, in the last, since about 2017, all of a sudden, Josh and I became quote unquote thought leaders. And
it's a fun title to just earn, isn't it?
I don't even understand that. And so, and then we work with the Peacock Group some, and they,
Denver's great. I love
Denver. Yeah. Love Denver and, known him for years. And we, so, they're talking to us about it. You guys are really thought leaders in Arkansas around renewables and stuff. And we're looking at him like, he is, twisted. Like, what are you talking about? So I think that there is something, there's something really odd about, kind of being young and dumb and starting this company and really just following your passion and your drive and trying to make customers happy, and your curiosity, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're a thought leader, you're on some 250 list, or you're just kind of going, what?
Yeah.
And it is odd, but once you get over being stunned, there's a real responsibility there, and Josh and I both feel that, we have a responsibility to our team to, not say anything that's going to, embarrass them. But we also, and to our company and to, each other, to, the partners, to our clients. We have some high profile clients, and, we're about to start in the process of getting it approved, but let's start, 2 major projects for, Lexicon. That's a large private company in Arkansas. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that. It's the first of its size to go before the Public Service Commission, so there's a lot of eyes on that. We have become voices. We need to have strong renewable policy in the state of Arkansas, not just because we have a company in it, but because this is the future and we don't want it to pass Arkansas by.
Yeah.
And then last year with the legislature, we got, kind of a crash course in that. And, unbeknownst to us, now we, I think I got nicknamed by the lead on that. He nicknamed me Gunslinger in the middle of that. And I really don't want to tell that story, but I get mail now that says Heather Gunslinger, AKA Gunslinger Nelson. So there's a lot of fun in that. And I am the first to say I really like swinging a sword for what I believe is right and good, and I like to think of myself as a born encourager, but the responsibility sometimes is daunting, and also I have an understanding around enemies. I've really enjoyed being a Pollyanna my whole life and being kind of naive a little bit, and maybe hustling a little bit for people's love. I'll admit that. And I like people to like me, and because I like people. Yeah. And so that's been really hard to read op-eds that are against our industry, or where we get named, or that feels painful. And I'm having to work through that. I don't want to be casual about it. It's really great to be a thought leader, and what a thrill. But there's a real responsibility to it. We've got to have voices out there. People have got to share their stories. This is kind of what you do, and I'm so jealous, and I love it. But we need all these different stories, and there can't just be one voice out there.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean the people who disagree with us are our enemy, and they're not. We don't hate them, but it's got to be okay for us to have a polite, smart, reasonable debate about stuff. And some of the op-eds against our industry lately have been really painful to read. And, we're not the enemy, and we don't believe, the utilities are the enemy either. And there's a common ground here. Sure. There's a middle ground here, but we just, it just gets really, really polarizing.
And I think to that point, there's so much conversation now that's that everybody has a voice with social media, with ways people can communicate on a certain topic. Everybody has a voice.
That's right.
And we want to quickly funnel those voices into the polarities. We
Right.
want to push them to the extremes instead of realizing, I think the majority of people actually want to live in that middle ground, but we only want to have the conversations around one extreme or the other. And to take it to this
You're
current
either
situation.
with me or you're against me.
Exactly. So you're either for coal power or you're for, solar power, whatever.
Not
And-
zero sum.
and both can sort of exist based on the current need, and we don't have to be so polarizing about it. But to bring it back to this pandemic situation, we can land on this for a few minutes. But when businesses started shutting down and the conversation quickly became about stay home, don't leave, and you have the other side that's like, no, let us go and work. And you don't know the full story of each side's needs or demands or desires. And so you have the person saying stay home because their grandmother's deathly ill already and she's at risk or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And then you have the other side that says, my family's in an incredibly difficult financial situation and I need to work to keep my family alive. And so you have people with different stories, but all you see is these polarizing mindsets. When the reality is we just need to step back and reset and move forward in a new direction. And I think that mindset needs to sort of, it's slowly becoming more commonplace now. It's taken 9 weeks to even become a thought in a lot of people's mind.
Right.
But now we're moving ahead. So I'm curious just from your perspective, because I know you talk a lot about leadership and leaders create leaders and all these great things that, becoming a thought leader means you're a leader first in your organization. You've done the things that allow you to now speak to the things. And so how are you leading through this situation? What is Seal Solar doing moving forward, moving ahead?
Imagine you're on cusp to have the best year of, this 8th year was going to be the best year ever.
Which
and
so many people were in the
so
exact
many
same
people
boat.
were in the
Everybody was on
exact
this
same.
incredible upward trajectory.
Yeah, we, even though there were some signals and stuff, I mean, so many companies are going, we were on par to have like the best year ever. Yeah. And that's, tremendously, as far as emotions go, I think just like everybody else, I think our leadership and myself, we were a little bit naive in the beginning and really thinking this is not as big of a deal as we think. So by the end of that first week when we're piloting and we're realizing, okay, we got to set a new normal. And so I am really proud, especially of the leadership team. You just think back over the last year, we've been putting this leadership team together and really, Josh and I delegating out responsibilities and not kind of controlling everything ourselves and every decision, and just cannot even imagine if all of this weight was just on the two of us right now, we might have croaked. But it was great because we have this leadership and team now, and everybody's kind of thinking about their part of the company and what's the best way to handle and get their work done. And everybody was kind of working together going, how do we keep the wheels on the bus? Is there a way for us to keep working? Is it responsible to keep working? How, what changes do we need to make? And we did make a lot of changes as far as, how many people were in a vehicle together and travel. I mean, we changed a lot of things. And we were very unsure. We had teed up some marketing and some investment, and is now the time to market, to advertise, is now the time to push all this. And so I'm not going to lie, those first couple of weeks were overwhelming with the sense of how do we delegate decisions out so that, Josh and I aren't, feeling the weight of every decision. But it was also about keeping everybody calm and saying we're going to get through this no matter what. Let's just keep our wits about us and over communicating, and I think women are really good at that. I'll just say men are not as good at communication.
Agree 100%.
And one of the things that I stress to our whole team, and especially to the leadership team, is I know you guys get sick of hearing me say communication, but now more than ever, it's going to be critical. You cannot over communicate in the midst of a global pandemic that nobody alive on this planet has ever lived through.
Right.
Anything like this. Nobody's ever run a business through anything like this. Nobody's worked through anything like this. This is everybody on the entire planet Earth is going through, in some ways, the exact same thing in different circumstances, but
Sure.
we're at least collectively all going through a global pandemic of the likes that none of us have ever experienced. So I said, the first thing we got to do is just everybody take a deep breath and breathe. And we're going to get through this, and know that we're going to get through this no matter what. And then let's just methodically kind of go, how do we walk through this? But there's been great things that have come out of it. Our team has loved Microsoft Teams. So we didn't use it before, and there are key people in our company. They're saying, I never ever want to do that meeting in person again. I only want to do it on Microsoft Teams because it's a more productive meeting.
Sure. Growth and innovation is hands down one of the most interesting things to see happen, in a very unfortunate situation. And I think it's really fun to kind of see how people are adapting. And then, to your point, this is actually how we're just going to do things moving forward because it works better.
I'm fascinated by it. I mean, our team kind of laughs at me because I am fascinated by the business side of this. Mm-hmm. I'm fascinated by the strategy behind this. I'm fascinated by just the human condition, the human nature. I think we're all talking about how we feel in ways that we never have before. The vulnerability and the transparency just within our team, kind of sharing about, how this feels. Working from home, how it feels with their family. A lot of them have kids, they're having to homeschool, or they have spouses working at home. And I've never heard our team talk as much about their feelings as they have the last 9 weeks, and I love it. I mean, because I think we're really getting to know each other on a more personal level.
On March 24th, I wrote this little article called The 5 Stages of Personal Progress Through the COVID-19 Era. And it was sort of my early assessment and acknowledgement of how people are feeling and getting through this time period. And so step 1 is acknowledgement. Step 2 is fear. Step 3 is frustration. 4 is action. And 5 is compassion.
Yeah.
And it's been really fascinating to watch as people move through these at different times, different paces, depending on where they're at in life. Yeah. But I'm curious kind of because to your point of the roller coaster, sometimes you kind of move into from fear and frustration into action, and you want to move forward, move ahead, but then you may step back into another area of fear or frustration with the situation. Yeah. But it's been really just interesting to see how people have moved forward through this and moved into the action. And I think to an earlier point we discussed, one of the most valuable things that's going to come out of this is the compassion, because everybody's dealing with it differently, whether it's new employee that you might have or business owners themselves feel and need compassion in different ways. So has that piece of it, have you seen that kind of come to fruition yet?
We have, and I think getting to see each other on camera is great, but there is something that even if you're 6 feet apart, you're feeling somebody's energy. Do we really give a damn about each other? Yeah. And maybe we did give a damn before all this, and we just didn't show it very well. It didn't translate. And so what I hope is that for us, those safe space conversations, that we continue that into whatever new normal we're all working into, but also that we continue on just looking at each other as humans, not necessarily what our title is or what our role is or whatever side that we see at work every day. I can't tell you how many of our employees will be in the middle of a very important call, and all of a sudden kids come out of nowhere crawling all over them. I mean, we literally have experienced at Seal Solar every coronavirus meme, we have experienced it on Microsoft Teams. And it's 3 months ago, some of that would have really upset me because and now it's the loveliest thing I've ever witnessed, and delightful, and I love it.
That's exactly. and it's kind of to the point of, we've always cared about the people that work with us for us, but kind of like we've always cared about, we know we should take care of ourselves and walk 5 miles a day or do these things, right? We know what we should do. We know in our mind, those are good things.
Right.
We just never have allowed ourselves to slow down and take the time to implement that into our day-to-day life. And now, not only are we doing that for ourselves, but we're doing it for the people around us that we see every day. And we're sort of forced into this new mindset and mentality. And I think it's great. I talk all the time about, what I do, telling stories, and specifically through video, the importance of human-to-human interaction.
Absolutely.
And when we can do it in person, we should always do it in person. The human-to-human interaction we've all experienced through this in the best way we possibly can, which a lot of times is through video chat.
That's right.
And I love, for me personally, the use of so much video becoming a way that we've been able to see that, right? We've been able to see that Rachel has 2 dogs and loves to birdwatch, and Josh is a coffee aficionado, and all these little things that we would have never been able to see before.
That's right.
And so there's a little bit of a silver lining, hopefully, coming out of this.
Absolutely. And I think policies are changing. Our policies are changing.
Sure.
We're taking a hard look at work from home policies, and there's been so much goodness that we found. Everybody in our office, so our design and engineering team, our project management team, marketing, sales, some of our operation, even our VP of finance, everybody's remote. And then we've got key people coming in, like managers that are coming in 1 day a week. And then we have Matthew on our team who's here every day. And so, we can't have maybe 2 people or so in and out. It just depends on workflow and different things. But, the bulk of our team every day for now 9 weeks has been working from home. Well, number one, we've gotten really good at some things we never thought we'd be good at. And frankly, didn't know if we could run this company remotely like this. And so now that it's working, you have to look at that and go, okay, what of this should we take into the new? Never had a remote policy. Maybe we need to have a remote policy. Maybe we need to be more creative. Maybe we've been too rigid about, everybody's got to be in the office all the time. Realistically, we can't go back to the way, and
Sure.
There are some people who can't do their job with a face mask on. So we're going to have to be creative about what even a phase 3 looks like for our company. Mm-hmm. There's things they've really enjoyed about working remotely. So how do we blend that to where we get the best experience for them, mm-hmm. while also getting the best work product for the company? And, I'll be the first to say that I never thought that I would hear Josh Davenport say that he wanted to work, remotely. And he's like, I think I'd like to work from home, 1 or 2 days, maybe a week, maybe not every week, but I'd like that flexibility. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I nearly fell out, and I went, really? Which is great. So I think that, there's something about being forced into a new normal that allows you to go, okay, none of us asked for this, but now that we've lived through it, now we've got to say, okay, what good can we take out of this and reset? Let's reimagine what our company looks like operationally on the other side of this. Not only do we technically have to do it because phase 3 is just not going to be a perfect scenario for us because of the nature of our business, but what could it look like? And
Sure.
let's not be so rigid that we have to go back to exactly the way we did it before, because we've learned just so much from the experience. We're selling projects through video. Who would have thought you could do,
I think you can do that.
Yeah,
actually.
Of course you can do. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I would love to see, corporations that are allowing more work from home employees to give them stipends, maybe to install solar energy on their homes instead of having big corporate office spaces, because now that people won't need, offices with 200,000 square feet,
Right.
and you've got people spending more time at home, well, incentivize or give benefits to your employees to improve their home instead of putting that into your office real estate.
Yeah.
And I think, a great way to do that would be, let's help them with installing solar and, on top of the tax credit. I don't know, there's just interesting ways that now, how can you improve people's lives and allow for more efficiency and better work out of those employees while they're able to stay at home with their dogs and walk 5 miles a day and, do all these things that people would love to do. We've created a culture of commutes and going into the office, and in some cases, that has to be the case for a lot of people, but
Right.
I think we can see a shift in culture, and it's going to affect a lot of industries in different ways, some better than others, but it's just been fascinating to kind of see the silver lining out of all this. Well, I think we could talk about this forever because it's such a new area. Everybody's trying to figure it out. I'm really curious. Nobody gets to where they are alone, and usually there's mentors and people that support you along the way. I like to call those, who are the titans in your life that have kind of gotten you to where you are? Who are some of the people that, whether it's people you've never met that write books or do talks, or people in your own life that have kind of encouraged and influenced you to keep pushing forward?
I love this question, and mainly because it allows me to spotlight people who have been just it's so good to me. So I think that I had a professor in college, Dr. Amalia, and I like to say that she was my professor, and then she was my mentor, and then she was my friend. And so I graduated from the University of Arkansas in '94, so that means that she and I have been friends for about known each other and been friends for about 27 years. And so probably one of my longest and most successful relationships. But I love her, and, she was such a great professor, but she meant so much more to me even when I was a couple of years removed from graduating. We started volunteering and serving together, and she just became such a tremendous mentor, and I would call her when I had opportunities, and it just it was a relationship that just kind of kept growing and kept getting deeper as the years went on. And I think everybody, there's a lot of people who have poured into me and who believe in me more than I deserve, but none more, I think, than Molly. She just has always seen something in me that I didn't always see in myself, and I just love and respect her dearly. But then, when I got into corporate lending, that was all this kind of great fluke. And David Russell, who's the president of First Security Bank up in Fayetteville, and so it was 1998, and I had to go through like a 3-interview process, and he was the last one. And I'm looking across from him, and I was fascinated because of banking. I wanted to do it for 5 years, because I'd worked for an entrepreneur right out of college. And what I figured out really quick was I shouldn't have slept through finance class in my undergraduate, and probably shouldn't have taken it as a summer class, because I took it as a summer class because I had zero interest in it. And working for an entrepreneur, I figured out really quick that you've got to understand, finance and all of that, and you've got to have a great banking relationship. And so there was an opportunity to go through the management training program. It was the Nations Bank at the time. And anyway, so I'm in the interview process, and, with David Russell, and I don't know why it was uncharacteristic at the time to be so vulnerable, but I was like, I'm really not qualified for this. And he was like, yeah, you've got all the skills we need with your marketing and development background and all this thing. He goes, we can teach you the banking, then we can teach you the finance side. And I've never forgot that, because when we interview people today, I just think about what skills do they have and what skills are teachable. Mm-hmm. There's some things you can't teach drive. They either have it or they don't. Right. And David taught me that. He was like, you've got drive. I can teach it, But there's other things that are totally teachable. And so really focus on, what are the other core things that you need that you can't teach, and hire that, and then mold the rest. So, that's a lesson that keeps giving. And then, I had, there's Robert Burnett, who is still considered, he's a rock star at Bank of America. He's over a huge chunk of the Mid-South for them in, strategy and corporate lending. And, I still talk to him and John Dominic on a regular basis. And I mean, these are, with all the talk around women in business and stuff, and men have been great to me. Overall, I'm not saying I've not had situations. But overall, my career and where I am today is primarily because great men saw something in me and really pushed me and really encouraged me. And then, with this, Ken saw, Josh's dad, Ken Davenport, Ken saw something in both Josh and I that neither of us saw separately or together. And he thought that we would be magic together. And where there is magic, there is both spark and fire. There's positive and negative. And so it has been grand, but it's also it's been challenging.
Sure.
And but we're so grateful to him because he saw something in us that that we hadn't. I've really tried to cultivate men and women in my life who will pour into me. Recognizing that I have deficits and that I need people who will tell me the truth, both the things that I'm doing well and that I do well at, and the things that I stink at, and the things I need to really work at.
All right. I want to go into the kind of quick hit section. We've already talked about best or favorite books. So obviously boundaries made a big impact in your life. Is there anything else, anything you're reading right now that stands out?
I tend to read a lot of business books, and so it's always nice to read a book that is not business based.
Brings back the human connection.
That's right. I kind of need to get tied back into that.
I love that.
And then I read recently a great book by John Eldridge's new book called Get Your Life Back. And John Mark Comer has a book, The Elimination of Hurry. And both of those books are kind of cycling about how are you building some bandwidth. And I'm paraphrasing, but how are you building some margin into your days and into your life to where it's just not all hustle, hustle, hustle.
So what's a daily routine that you have to do?
Well,
even lately, because obviously that's probably changed quite a bit.
In the New World Order, definitely walking. So at the beginning of this year, it's kind of a fluke, but I said I'm going to do 49 things because I was going to turn 49 in 2020. And so I read somewhere somebody said they did like 48 things, and I was like, I'm going to turn 49. I'll do 49 things this year. And the thought process behind the list is, and you can do it at any age, 30 things if you're turning 30, but it's 49 things that I've always wanted to do that I'm just not going to put off any longer. And so one of the things I came up with was, I was going to do 52 hikes. And then ironically, I found out that there's actually 52 state parks. And so in Arkansas, so what I said was, well, I'm going to hike all 52 state parks. And so the thought was I was going to do 52 hikes, but then I was like, let's push myself. So now I'm hiking every trail within each state park. And some state parks have multiple trails. And so, I was ahead of schedule before all this started, so that's good. But what I did was I just started walking, and I do 5 miles a day, but some days I've gotten up to 7.5 miles. But I did that for my sanity because I just was like, I've got to get out in nature.
That's awesome. Best piece of advice. Can you boil it down to one sentence or phrase?
When I worked for Bank of America, they had values, mission, and that was the first like really major company I'd ever worked for. I'm in my 20s, and one of the value statements was, in all things, do the right thing. And I remember when I saw that and learned all the kind of about, what was behind that. And, we kind of, when we started SEAL, that was the thing that I said, that has to be at the core, because that just felt so important to me. So in all things, do the right thing.
Last official question. If you wrote a book, what would the title be?
I have written a book. It's not fully done, and it may never get published. And the title of it is called Face Down. And the reason that it's really around leadership, but it's kind of about, everybody wants to talk about, lean in and rise up and all of this stuff, but nobody really talks about the gnarly process of what really happens when you fail, and that process of the actual stepping up and rising up.
All right. Well, Heather, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time.
If you liked this episode of Titans of Industry, head to contenttitan.co/podcast for more episodes, or subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks for listening.